Hey everyone, welcome to the newest episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Today's guest is an indie rock alternative singer-songwriter, producer, and multi-instrumentalist based in Philadelphia. He's got a new album right now called Adventure, Violence, Scary Images that you need to go check out. It's on Spotify, Bandcamp, all that good stuff. He even put out 2 new songs that are exclusively on Bandcamp called Minute to Dance and In the Quiet of Midnight. Awesome vintage kind of 60s vibes. You need to go listen to it. But before we get the episode started, please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And on that note, please welcome Kevin Basko from Rubber Band Gun. Kevin Basko from the Rubber Band Gun, thank you for joining me for an episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Yeah, I'm really pumped to meet you here virtually. I heard your 2 newest songs, Minute to Dance and In the Quiet of Midnight, that you put on Bandcamp, and they're great songs. They're very vintage, kind of 60s vibe. I saw that you recorded it with a Tascam tape recorder. Is that typically how you record your music?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit of a I hate to use the word throwback, but in terms of my discography, my first couple releases I made back in 2013, the first couple RBG albums were made only on that 8-track Tascam 488. That's kind of has been my bread and butter for a while until I got the reel-to-reel, the 16-track Tascam. I love Tascam. But that was kind of me jumping back to, during the holidays, I was just kind of running around a lot. And I think that the Porta Studio has such a great portability, obviously. So, I can bring it all over the place, around the house and stuff. So it was kind of just a little bit of a departure from what I've been doing the last bunch of years, which is mostly still out of the box recording, but more with using outboard gear and using the 16-track reel-to-reel. And so it was a little bit of a for me, like kind of jumping back into the old ways that I started out for this project. But this time for that project, those couple songs, I started to use the kind of my effects chain, my outboard gear, my preamps, my compressors, all that stuff into the Porta Studio. Whereas the first couple albums I did were really, it was like, if anything, maybe guitar pedals into the Porta Studio, because the Porta Studio has only a 1/4 inch in. There's no mic inputs. And it was mostly just direct in for those first couple albums I did. Again, that was back in 2013, 2014. So these new couple that I was playing around with were kind of trying to find a good balance between the old and all the new stuff I've been doing. So it was a fun little random project. I didn't really expect to make those. It was just they just kind of came out. I wrote them very quickly, mixed them very quickly, and yeah, they just kind of put them out.
Yeah, they're great songs, and you put out so much music. I mean, you just said that you've been releasing music since 2013, and when I found your music, I actually heard Adventure, Violence, Scary Images first, which came out November of last year. But I mean, I look at your Spotify page and your Bandcamp page, and it's like every year you have 2 albums worth of songs at least that you put out. Is there like a big lesson you've learned, or a lot of just any advice you would go back and give to yourself for recording, because you've had so much time to really dig into the art of recording?
Well, recording is one of those things that, like, going to music school, like there was a lot of people who were doing one or the other. They were writing or they were recording. It was like there was a very thick layer of glass in the studio, as you can imagine. Like there's the engineers on one side, producers, and then the artists on the other side. And it was really nice when I was at school to think that you don't have to stay on one side or the other. And I know it sounds like something that everyone knows, but when you're going to school for a specific trade, or a major in this case of music, you would focus on the songwriting, or you would focus on the engineering. And I didn't know too many people that were trying to do it all themselves. The DIY culture at Berkeley wasn't really, at least as far as my genre, or the genre I was interested in, wasn't really a big thing. So that was a big thing about what made my sound the way it was. It was my whole discography is me figuring out how to use stuff. They're like diary entries. I hate to say they're like, I think about them sometimes as they're kind of serialized, where they're very personal in the way that you can hear, again, me figuring it out. You could hear me getting a lot of stuff wrong. And that's kind of a big theme, a running theme. I mean, I did the RBG 25 challenge. I don't know if you've heard about that I did in 2019. That was essentially that in 2019, I recorded 25 releases and released them all in the year 2019. And that was a big thing for me. And that was probably one of my favorite things I've done as far as exercising and writing, exercises in production and recording. I learned a tremendous amount that year, 2019, because I just kept, one of my good friends, producer Jonathan Rado, he essentially challenged me in the beginning of the year, said, because he knows I put out a lot of stuff. He was like, I want to see if you can make 25, or I think at first it was like 20, and then we ended up upping it to 25. And the rule was there can only be at least 3 songs per release, because that was kind of, I guess, in a way, would make it an EP. It wasn't so much an album challenge as like a release challenge. And each album had or release had their own, not only their own limitation, but their own kind of theme, their own sometimes artists that I was emulating or listening a lot to, or style, or just genre in general. And giving yourself those kind of limitations helps you fill the frame better. So a couple albums I did, I was like, okay, this record, I'm not going to put kick drum and I'm not going to put bass guitar, which seems like a huge crutch, right? But when you give yourself these little things, you find ways to make it work without it. And you find things that you might not have thought of before to make it different. I think a lot of my discography is that. It's me putting limitations on. I mean, limitations with using using out-of-the-box recording, tape recording where you only have 16 tracks or you only have 8 tracks. You're already limiting yourself. I mean, a lot of these people send me stems and for mixing, a lot of times I'm getting like 45 plus tracks. And I get that. That's there's a lot of important things for different styles of music. There's a lot of different what it calls for. But giving yourself limitations can really make your choices a little more pure, in my opinion. A little less, I'll figure it out later. More like, I always talk about this a lot in studio talk. I kind of subscribe to the Marie Kondo way of like spark joy. Like you really need to feel like it's spark joy, or you can do without it. And that comes with a lot with, in my opinion, like first takes, couple first takes, going with your instincts, going with your gut, going with your first, impression of what the song needs, and not sitting there overthinking it, mixing it for 10 months, deciding, what needs to go where. For me, that stuff, in my opinion, makes things a little bit stagnant, a little stale. And in my opinion, the real, it doesn't need to be improvisational, big jazz numbers, but it should have an air of spontaneity to it that has those things that people like Brian Eno talk about, where they're these flaws that aren't necessarily flaws, but they're things in the music that a computer couldn't recreate, MIDI maybe couldn't recreate the same way, and those human touches. So that's a big thing about my discography and learning and things that if I was to tell myself, an old a past self something, I would just say, I don't think I'd change much. I mean, there was things that I could teach myself, maybe with like, don't EQ out 16K, or no, some things like that, like shit like that is like silly, that I've learned, like tricks. I mean, I've learned my outboard gear a lot to the point where it's a very valuable tool for just dialing in what I want and expressing a sound quicker than having to sit there and tinker with it for 5 hours. I can get a sonic quicker now than I probably could before, because I have a little more options, but also I'm a little bit quicker with the language of how to get it using just roll-offs and different kind of EQ things and compression. But again, I think a big part of what I like about my discography, if anything, is that there's a lot. I was talking a couple days ago with a friend, and you were talking about how it's kind of like the dollar bin at like a record store, like my discography. There's a lot of shit, and you could dig through it, and there's some stuff you'll pull out, you'll be like, what is this? Doesn't belong there. You wouldn't think they were the same artist, which I personally, that's something that I feel, if anything, proud about with my own music.
Man, you just gave me so much great information there.
Sorry, I talk a lot on these
No.
Sometimes I do podcasts. I just talk a lot because I'm just like, there's a lot of things to talk about. So sorry, keep going.
No, do not apologize. This show is very much, there's not too much of a structure. Like anybody who doesn't want to talk a lot, you don't have to. If you have a whole thing you want to go on a tangent on,
I love
all
talking.
about it.
I love talking shop. I love talking shop.
Me too.
I
Hey,
love talking about music.
That's why
That's
I
why you have a
started this
podcast,
show,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to be able to talk to people like you. But there's definitely a few things I want to touch on because I think you mentioned a lot of great things. One being that obviously practice has gotten you where you are now. I mean, 7 years at least of writing and recording and releasing. I mean, probably at least 100 songs by now, I would think.
Oh, I mean, I've hit, I think maybe into the 400 or 500s at this point. There's a lot I've demoed that I did this thing for a while. Sorry, you probably have a question. Sorry, I cut you off.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, that is amazing, and I would imagine doing all that is just a constant lesson learned. But also, I know you mentioned going to school for music and recording, and it's Berklee College of Music, correct? That's where you went. Mm-hmm. My previous On That Note guest, Ursay, also went there, and he said something very similar to what you said, which was that there seems to be, for some reason in college, a divide between, you know, if you want to be a songwriter, that's what you do. If you want to be a singer, that's what you do. Or jazz guitarist, that's what you do, as opposed to bringing all these elements together to actually be like a self-sufficient one-man, one-woman band. And that's cool. You both kind of took that initiative to go that way. Is there any advice you would give to someone who's a little nervous about stepping out of their comfort zone and getting into recording or getting into writing?
I mean, just you have to like let go of any sort of shame, any sort of ego, any sort of pressure you put on the idea that this one release is going to sum up your life and completely encapsulate your whole definition of what music is in this one EP. It's like if it's not perfect, then I will be ruined forever. It's like people need to get over that. Like I have so many friends that don't release stuff because they're nervous about like, this is my one shot, first impressions being everything. And I get that. Like, that is not an untrue thing to say in the industry. It is important sometimes to have your best foot step forward. At the same time, it's very easy to overthink yourself and let yourself get farther from yourself. When, you know, in reality, music should be about honesty, and it should be about you being yourself. And, you know, I'm a big believer in not over curating yourself, not judging what you're doing. And, you know, so just like my advice I tell people all the time is just don't worry about what people think. Make music for yourself. And I get people hold themselves to a very high standard, and they want to reinvent the wheel, and they want to break things open. And I get that. Everyone wants to make a wave, you know. But you know, you have to break a couple eggs in the same thing. You have to get your foot in the door, and you have to try it. And if you're going to spend, you know, 7 years of your life mixing the same EP to get it perfect, it's like, what have you really done? Like, you've lost 7 years. That's what you've done. And you've spent on something that, you know, may not even sadly be relevant anymore. I hate that word. I talk about that issue of relevance on Adventure Violence a lot. And because that word to me has such a strange meaning in today's world. What's relevant? What genre makes sense? And in my opinion, songs will always make sense. I talk about this a lot, that songs are the thing that I find to be, no matter what genre you're in, no matter what year it is, a really great song being melody, lyrics, chords, that will still be strong in 2050. If someone writes an amazing song, whether it's like, you know, that fucking song from you know, the Star, okay. You know, The Star Is Born, like, you know, that was perfect. But you know, that song, like the Lady Gaga song, like that, I hate to use that as an example, but I mean, that shows you at a time when music wasn't really feeling like songwriting was important. That song was still so much more singable, so much more memorable than half the shit on Top 40. And there's a reason it stuck there. There's a reason it won a Grammy or won an Oscar, whatever the hell it won. And I mean, that's a weird example, I guess. I haven't really thought about it, but more so the idea is that people need to let down their, or let go of their like their judgmental view of themselves. That you could be critical of yourself, but let it like have a result. Let it be to some release. Like it's different to turn the pressure cooker on to open it, you know, versus putting that same pressure on and sitting on it. I mean, it's not going to get any better. It's like you're cooking, you know, the pressure cooker, it works with like what, like 5 hours? Like if I was keeping the pressure cooker for like 400 hours, it would be a piece of shit. It would not be edible, you know? So it's like at a certain point, you need to let it go and you need to like put it out. And if it's something that's true to you, it doesn't have to define your whole being and life. What it does do, and this is what I believe very strongly, is what you're releasing this time is a picture of you. It's a I hate to use the word, but it's a snapshot. It's a Polaroid. It's a picture of what you were doing at this time. And that's why I believe trying to over curate it is like photoshopping a picture you post on Instagram. It's like, why do you care so much about changing what is true to you? And I understand that, you know, certain musicians, they feel like they're not executing it the way that they feel they should. And I understand might be a little bit of a different issue. But when it comes to being honest about it, it could be in a much simpler, purer form than a lot of people think. And they think they need to meet these expectations of today's production efforts. But some of my favorite ever recordings, like one of my friends and great songwriter Tobias Jesso Jr., I listened to some of his early demos that he wrote before he was writing for Adele, before he was writing for Pink. He had these piano demos on a laptop that were the purest writing, lyrics, melody. It was just him and a piano. And I mean, he ended up being very, very successful. Because of that, but through other, you know, workings and people that he's met and just being an amazing writer. But those recordings were straight up magic. And that's, to me, that's, you know, if he didn't feel the need to release that kind of work and those kind of simple, bare songs, you know, he might not have the success he has now. I mean, and he has, you know, tremendous success from it, from writing essentially like these really brilliant Randy Newman, Harry Nilsson type songs, very core songwriting, classic, the kind of songs you hear and you're like, wow, not in a pastiche way, like it's an old, you know, old thing, but like in a way like timeless in the way that a good song would be, like Burt Bacharach or something, where it's like these are timeless songs, you know. So I mean, yeah, that's my. I always get off topic. I'm always going through these fucking webs of conversation.
No, that's great advice. Taking the pressure off yourself to create this master EP or this master first album is very unlike. I mean, it's important and it's unlikely that you're going to create this masterpiece or this magnum opus right off the bat. So you should just take that off the table. And like you said, have fun and allow it to be a snapshot of who you are right now. And it'll be cool in the future when people can go back and be like, you know, they do see the flaws and they
want to see you grow.
They do. Yeah. And that is a hard thing as anyone, but especially an artist, to grasp, is that people do enjoy the flaws. And, you know, I mean, I've spent so many years probably fine tuning my little vocal line on Logic Pro when I didn't need to, because, you know, even if it's a little flat or it's a little sharp, people hear the emotion and like that. And if I go too crazy, and then it sounds robotic, it doesn't sound very real, and people can't maybe put a finger on why they don't like it, but they know there's something that's not quite real about it. And it's so cool because all of your music has that quality. It has that human quality. Was there something about Adventure Violence, Scary Images, that you went into with like an idea? You were talking about how one EP you didn't do a kick and you didn't do a bass guitar. So for Adventure Violence, Scary Images, did you have any kind of thing you were set out to do?
Well, I moved to Philadelphia. I'm in Philadelphia now. I moved to Philadelphia from New Jersey March 1st of 2020. So 15 so days before COVID really hit. And while I was here, I started to essentially just relearn the new studio, relearn the house, or not relearn, just learn the house, learn the acoustics, learn where I can do certain things, figuring out what kind of setup. The drums are in the basement now, the live room was in the living room, and I do some stuff up here. There's a lot of figuring out of the space, as well as emotionally dealing with what everyone else was dealing with this sense of not only the isolation, but this tremendous sense of obligation to chronicle with art. It's like such a dumb, like, oh, all these people are writing their best thing, or like, during this time, when they're gonna write your best magnum opus, and it's shit like that. It's like there was a lot of pressure to create, and this was after I did, like, this was a couple months, like I finally got like a little bit of a vacation because last year again, 2019, I wrote like 25 releases, but among that, a lot of songs. In addition to producing, I think 4 or 5 records for other people. In addition to touring for 5 months of the year, twice to Europe, like all over the place. Like 2019 was a busy year for me, and to come, 2020 was supposed to be a little bit of a breather, and in some ways, the fact that I could just stay. I had to stay home and figure out the studio and work with the gear I had, and also listening to a lot of music that was kind of new to me. A lot of artists that I've been listening to that at that time was like heavy into Burt Bacharach, Elvis Costello, Laura Nyro. I was, strangely enough, I grew up not really liking Bob Dylan. In 2019, I got very, very enamored by Bob. Just got very, very fascinated by Bob Dylan. He was just something clicked, and it just all went straight into my head, and I could really, it had an instant connection for some reason that for a long time just wasn't there. So I was able to kind of take all these things and kind of put them in a weird smoothie and drink them and then spit something else out. That's kind of how I make music. I feel like I kind of internalize my influences, and then using things that I learned through just the process of writing, through knowing theory, also knowing how I can essentially, if there's a chord sound that I like, I can figure out what it is pretty quickly, and then find a way to manipulate it into my own vocabulary to use. Different colors. Also, probably the biggest influence, Paul Simon on that record. Huge influence. The solo Paul Simon stuff, especially like There Goes Rhymin' Simon. Some of that, I've always been a big Paul Simon fan, but for some reason it kind of like everyone, it comes and goes. You get waves where your influences kind of resonate with you, and then you kind of take a break from them. And Paul Simon was a big influence on that record. Just the way that he's got some great interviews with Dick Cavett, and where he's talking about him choosing chord colors and the use of prolonging certain chord qualities, such as like the 4 chord, or going to some kind of modulation or something, foregoing it until so long in the song, so that way when you get to the bridge or whatever, you can really bring a new color, bring something that hasn't been done before. So stuff like that was a big influence on my writing. I kind of felt like, again, for the 25 challenge, I was trying to pull from a lot of different places. I did one album that was like a shoegaze, My Bloody Valentine thing. I did one album that was like a straight up acoustic thing. I did a couple like Daniel Johnston things. I was pulling all over the place. There was a lot of Bruce Springsteen stuff. Just all the artists I liked, I was trying to like kind of tap into that and find a little bit of I'm always looking for the heart of something, the heart of the song, the heart of the album, a perspective, point of view. Not just lyrically, but just thematically with the way the music sounds. So for this release, it was a little bit, again, dealing with the isolation like everyone was, but also dealing with the expectation of what people were putting on artists during the pandemic. And I call it the quintessential pandemic album versus other people's, because in my opinion, it's a very disjointed record. It has moments of clarity and then moments of complete confusion, both sonically, lyrically, just choices of songwriting. There was a lot of things in there that for me were foggy, versus 2019, which felt very true, felt very like I was able to express myself through also knowing that I didn't have the burden of like, okay, I'm going to make one record this year and really fine tune those 10 songs. I made like 100 plus songs just in 2019, recorded and released, most of them for free. And so it was one of those things that there wasn't much pressure in 2019, even though there was pressure to finish the challenge. But the 2020 Adventure Violence record felt like a very mixed bag of everything, and everyone was dealing with it. And I think that, me coming off the challenge, I was kind of able to express the confusion in a way that I felt was pretty direct. I felt like I had a pretty direct pipeline to my emotions. I can kind of just pull it out because of the somewhat therapeutic nature of the 25 challenge, where I was having feelings from coming home from tour and immediately spitting them out onto paper without even thinking about them. I didn't have the luxury of overanalyzing my lyrics until after they were long out, and I could listen to them and be like, oh shit, I didn't know that was what I was talking about, which is kind of what comes with not having things in the press cycle, not having a label, not sitting on it for 10 months and mulling over the music video or the single or negotiating with the label what's what. So because of that, I have the privilege of that instant dopamine release of Bandcamp. And I love Bandcamp for it. Bandcamp is like a straight shot of adrenaline in my ass. It's fucking a beautiful network. And I don't think, honestly, my whole career would not be the same without having that kind of partnership with them. So.
Wow. Well, there's so much good stuff you keep saying, man.
Sorry, I keep spewing shit out.
No,
I'm sorry for the podcast listeners.
I'm just trying to be like, damn, I gotta think of all these, like you say so many things, and I'm like, okay, I gotta hit this, I gotta hit that, I gotta hit that. I mean, I think it's beautiful that you were able to take the feeling of uncertainty and not any clarity and translate that into an album after experiencing the total opposite the previous year. And it's funny how it seems to be that there was more pressure on an album that you could make kind of at any time. You know what I mean? It's not like you were going and touring or doing anything like that, or you didn't have this challenge. So it's funny that when you had more work and arguably more deadlines and things like that it was less pressure, whereas you had more pressure when you didn't exactly have any obligations.
Well, it was also somewhat following up the 25, following up some of my most pure releases, my most honest releases. And I honestly think, though, that the Adventure Violence record might be my most personal and honest release. It kind of feels like almost like a solo record with my name on it versus Rubber Band Gun. And I really felt, the reason I felt like it was also a quintessential pandemic record, because the chaos of it wasn't like Animal Collective. It wasn't like Eric Copeland, where it wasn't these sounds that were coming at you to like symbolize the virus and the confusion. No, it was just the songwriting was a little bit disjointed. The songwriting was like a touch of something is off here. It was a touch of that uncertainty, but it wasn't like what they like when the film production world or film scoring, it wasn't Mickey Mousing it, it wasn't giving you these, like when Spider-Man's going up the wall and, Hans Zimmer, whoever did or Danny Elfman, has it going, boom, 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 it wasn't on the nose. Like it wasn't showing chaos like that guy who did the Twin Towers falling, and it's just like those tape loops that are like really, giving you that kind of emotional response. It's just the writing itself that I had felt very vulnerable. It felt very lyrically intimate, and I think it has some of my best lyrics in it because of that. I was really in touch with the communication pipeline from the 25 challenge, and I was also, because of that, I also didn't have as much. I didn't have as much fear about releasing, because again, what I love about my discography is that it's very much based on the idea that if you don't like this, you're gonna like the next thing. And I want there to be enough in that dollar bin that someone's going to find something great about it. And that leads people to making their own playlists. There's a lot of great RBG playlists out there where people taking their own songs, and none of them none two are the same. There are widely different deep cuts people will take. For people listening, if you haven't checked out my music, I recommend on Bandcamp there is a Best of the RBG 25 album. It's 25 songs, the best ones from that year, from 2019. Definitely some of my best songs overall. But that's a good place to start, and then you can branch off to seeing all the albums and how my year changes through 2019, and you can go back even further, 2014 and 13. There's a lot of growth there. And again, this goes back to what I said before about people not being, in today's world, like where things are different, there's no more gatekeepers. There's no more label gatekeepers keeping you away, paying, holding the carrot, trying to get you to go for studio time. They don't do that shit anymore. Or they do, but we don't need to do that, We have the ability. There is so much content out there. There's so many new bands. Every day there's a new band. Every day there's a new album that comes out. Every day is a release day for somebody. It wasn't like that like even 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I'd say. So now we have the luxury of, in the same way that people are afraid of posting too much on Instagram, and because they'll think, in 50 years, I don't want people to look at look at my life. I'm the opposite in the musical sense, where it's like I want there to be an excess of content for people to dig through and for people to find what they like, find something that speaks to them. Like, who am I to say what speaks to somebody? Who am I to tell somebody what of mine they will like? So why would I be the one to curate it? Even though it's my name, it's something I made. I'm not going for Master Chef, like trying to get my perfect audition dish. I'm just making buffet and take whatever the fuck you want. That's my philosophy, I guess.
That's a great way of looking at it, I think, because like you said, it takes the pressure off of having to like release something that's gonna be this huge deal to you, and it's like, well, maybe this one isn't the best for you, but somebody else might love it more than you would expect, and it's best to not deprive people of that. And I have to ask you about Foxygen, who's a band you played with, and I read that you, while playing with them, shared the stage with artists like The Strokes and Flaming Lips and Unknown Mortal Orchestra. I got Strokes and Unknown Mortal Orchestra behind me. The albums.
Right there.
Yeah, so I had to ask about that. How was that experience? What did you learn from that? How cool was it, like, being able to meet, people that for me are such, heroes?
Well, to start it off, like Foxygen, I saw Foxygen for the first time opening up for Unknown Mortal Orchestra in 2013. It might have been during it was during the, what the hell is that's the UMO2, right? With the sword. It was during that record. And I went to see UMO. I didn't know Foxygen. And I saw Foxygen and I was blown away. I was at Berkeley. I was blown away by this band. And it's still probably my favorite concerts ever was that show. And I'd never seen a band like that. I'd never seen a band have so much life. In a world where I was at Berkeley and I was dealing with a lot of clean life musical, stylings, and not to bash Berkeley at all. Berkeley is phenomenal, but I needed that little bit of, gristle. I needed that little bit of fat to show me what I was missing. And it really lit a fire under my ass. And I immediately remember going home and doing some research on their influences, and who was Richard Swift, who is probably, R.I.P., one of the greatest producers of all time, one of the greatest musicians possibly, very underrated artist. And he passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. But he was one of the ones who really, him and Rado, who inspired me to start with the Porter Studio, start with cassette, realize that as the artist, you can do so much of that on your own. My friend Spencer Tweedy told me one time, we were talking about songwriting in general, and he said the phrase when I was talking about the songwriter being the producer, and he said, "Mother knows best." And I always parrot that and tell people about that because I love that phrase. I love "Mother knows best" because it's true. I think the songwriter knows what the song needs, and obviously production collaborations. There's a lot of back and forth that's important. But I think at the end of the day, a good songwriter will know what the song needs. Back to Foxygen, though. With Foxygen, it was a huge experience to join that band. It was one of the biggest privileges of my life to join a band that I was very much inspired by and befriend them and then become some of my closest friends and then get to tour with them for 3 or 4 years. And, by the time that, I was on those tours, I was stoked to share the stage with the Strokes and UMO, but I was equally stoked at that time to be with Foxygen. It was almost like I was less concerned with those big bands. It was a privilege, and I was like, in my head I'm thinking like, I can tell a lot of people about this, and that'll be a great thing to talk about. But at the end of the day, the pure joy was just from being able to be in Foxygen, because Foxygen to me was up there as one of, in my opinion at the time especially, probably one of the best bands out there during that time in terms of rock bands that had real life, had real personality and point of view and perspective. It was a lot of heart too. But yeah, we played a bunch of shows with UMO, a bunch of shows with the Strokes. We played a couple New Year's shows with the Flaming Lips that were phenomenal. We played what other big bands? There was a bunch of really great bands we've played with. A lot of great festival lineups that we would get to experience with people. But yeah, overall it become like an almost famous experience. It was a lot of ups and downs. It was, I wish there was a documentary person there, because there was some crazy shit, there was some cool shit, some weird shit, some good, bad shit. It was all over the place. It was truly a theatrical experience for me. And what was kind of funny though was the years after that, touring with Jackie, and then eventually doing my own tours. It was kind of a decrescendo in terms of the scope of it. I mean, with Jackie, we toured with Mac DeMarco, we toured with Wise Blood, we toured with the Lemon Twigs, we toured with Molly Birch, Adam Green, Alex Cameron. We toured with some amazing acts, some of the best around. I mean, Wise Blood, probably one of the greatest songwriters in the last couple of years in terms of her size of her and scope of what those couple of records were. But it definitely, with the Jackie stuff, it was a little smaller because we were doing our own tour managing. We weren't staying with Foxygen. We were staying in Stevie Wonder's tour bus. We were in the huge orange bus. This was coming right out of college. I didn't do the whole van tour. This was right out of college. I'm on a tour bus, sleeping in a bunk. Traveling at night. All the whole 9 yards. And then years later, touring with Jackie Cohen, it was a little bit more intimate, a little bit, still big shows, big venues, but we weren't headlining, we were opening. And it was a little more intimate. It was a little bit more of a personal experience. And then after that, I did some Rubber Band Gun tours that were very small, very underattended, 30 people maybe in the crowd at times. But what was amazing about that experience was that even though, some people be like, man, I used to be playing the big stage and now I'm playing in the basement. What was amazing was those later tours were some of my favorite tours, because I already had those experiences. I had those big sold out shows playing for 50,000 people in Barcelona shit. I was just happy to be doing it for myself. And it didn't matter how many people were there. I had no more boxes to check. This was about me doing something for myself. So at a certain point, nothing fazed me anymore in terms of the big star, the big lights and stuff. It was about getting it for myself, finding a place of personal growth for my band. And I really just toured with a bunch of Jersey boys like myself. It was my friends from high school. And we just got in my stupid little minivan and we went down to, DC and Nashville and North Carolina. And we played a bunch of shows and some basement college kids. And it was amazing. So, to answer your question, I really loved playing with those big bands. But as you go on in life, you realize that, the things you do, the small things for yourself, can be just as powerful as playing with those huge idols that you put on a pedestal. It's about getting those personal experiences and finding your own place. Because again, I was a hired gun, and those experiences were major for me and so influential. But until I could do it for myself, it put a lot of it into perspective.
Wow. That's so cool to go from, right out of college into, this experience that most artists, I mean, if not all, want to have, going on the world tour, playing for 50,000 people. And that's interesting that you had a kind of a decrescendo of that. And that's amazing that you view it the way you do, where it's not a disappointment because you're playing for less people. You're taking the best of all these experiences, because if you don't have that outlook on it, then you kind of have to reassess, like, why did you get into this in the first place? So that's awesome. So that you have that mindset. And also shout out to Spencer Tweedy. I just heard you mention him. I'm a big Wilco fan.
Well, that guy's That guy, yeah, that guy's a straight. He's probably one of the nicest human beings in existence.
He seems
and one
really
of the most
nice.
talented, humble, all around nicest guys that you could ever work with or be friends with. So I'm very lucky to have him as a friend. He's a very talented guy.
So cool. Awesome. Well, that's going to take us over to the last 5 here. I'm just going to ask you 5 quick questions and we'll be done.
Sounds good.
All right. Number 1 is in the studio or playing live?
Honestly, right now I think in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, you have such a setup from what I've seen in your photos. It looks awesome.
Well, the thing about live that I've always felt, it's very fleeting. It's amazing, but it's gone in a second. And the highs you get off of a studio, when you start to record and it starts to click, that feeling will never get up there again. And that's why even when you're in the recording process, after it starts to click, it's all downhill. The press release, the putting it out, the waiting for criticism, the feedback, everything else, it goes down. But when you start to make something out of nothing from air, that's magic. And it's when it gets to a point where it starts to feel right, that can't be duplicated in any type of. I mean, maybe I can imagine an artist of someone who paints or sculpts or something like that could have a moment where it becomes clear, a moment of clarity. But that feeling in the studio is, in my opinion, my favorite feeling. And live music is amazing too. I think that there's a high there too. But the recording can last forever. I think that's something I've really always felt strong about.
I totally agree. It does feel like magic because, 30 minutes ago, you were just, strumming your chords and all of a sudden you have this song that's your favorite thing you've ever released. And if you, record it almost I don't want to say the right way, but if you are quick to get it down, sometimes you can really catch that magic of, something that isn't quite too refined yet, which is lovely.
Well, that kind of potential is what should keep everybody going. The fact that it could take literally a minute for not only the recording, but the writing. It could just be you looking at the wall and something clicks. It's that fast. And it could be the difference between you being, not that money is the object, but being a multimillionaire and not. And not that money's the object again, but it's that quick that you could come up with something that breaks through. So it's that kind of potential that, going back to what I said before with people, there's no reason why you shouldn't just go for it. It's that easy. If Franz Ferdinand can do it, nothing against them, I don't know. But I'm saying when you have a big hit and you're just like a band, it's it could be, that seems like a slight to Franz Ferdinand. I don't even know why I mentioned them. But
no offense to Franz.
No, they're cool. They're cool.
Awesome. Well, question 2 is, what do you think is a perfect album front to back?
Front to back. I have a list here. Can I consult my list?
Yes, please.
I think I do have a list. I think I have a list of some of my fix. I feel like I have this dumb, off the top of my head, I think something like Graceland by Paul Simon obviously is a perfect record. Let's see what we got here. I might not have a good. Oh, okay. Here's a couple. So, Born to Run.
Nice.
Perfect album.
My dad will be stoked you said that. That's Bruce is his favorite artist of all time.
Yeah, Born to Run, definitely. Yeah, I think it's perfect. There's a record by by Herbie Hancock called Man Child. That's an amazing record from the 70s. Honestly, I think all 4 of these records I'm going to name are all from the same year. I think they're all from 72 or 71. Still Crazy After All These Years by Paul Simon, another one amazing. Lola by the Kinks, Lola vs. Money Underground. There's another one on top of my head I was going to name. Oh, wait. Strangers in the Night, Frank Sinatra. God, there's so many to name. Most of Barbra Streisand's records I love, I really get behind. I got so many on here. I just have I don't know why. So once in a while, I'll just be what albums do I love?
You love the classics, the old school stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old. I consider myself with my own music to. Some people want to be innovative, right? Some people want to know the next genre. They want to jump to that. Rubber Band Gun is not innovative. It's traditionalist. It's a traditional. I value songs and traditions in the way that someone, and I'm not trying to compare myself, but an artist like Bob Dylan, this sense of tradition and a sense of knowing what a good song is versus trying to reinvent the wheel versus trying to figure out the next vibe, the next genre, what the next hi-hat rhythm is going to be. I really feel strongly about valuing tradition and valuing songs. And I would be naming a lot more artists, contemporary ones, if I felt like there were ones that cared equally about song as production and technique and studio tricks. Beach Boys, huge Beach Boys fan. I know that these are all old artists, but in terms of contemporary artists, though, the Lemon Twigs, possibly the greatest contemporary band
Who
in terms
you've
of
worked with, right?
I've helped on a little bit on Go to School, a little bit on some of the early recordings of songs for the general public. I toured with them a couple times. We did a record together for the RBG 25 called Blues. It's a blues record, and it's really cool actually. We did it in their basement, and I mean those guys are some of the best musicians I have ever met, including everyone I met at Berkeley, because these guys have that spark and that heart that you don't really see nowadays in a lot of artists. These aren't the guys tinkering on Ableton. Not there's anything wrong with that, but these are the guys who musicianship and writing at its core level are they excel, and they are superior in every way because of that. Because they have a true understanding of musicality, of songwriting, and just being musicians. Like there's not a lot of musicians nowadays. It sounds really conceited to say or mean, but musicians, I was watching this really quickly about Prince. I have this interview with Prince was talking about if you ever uses samples. This might have been the late 90s. And Prince says, "No, I don't sample. I'm a musician." I thought that was very interesting. It's obviously a little bit untrue. Like you could be a musician and use samples, but he's like, "No, I make my own things. I don't curate and rearrange things that have been done. I create." And I thought that was a really interesting way to think about, at least kind of how I feel about being a musician and making things, and feeling like it's better to pull something out of thin air than try to, in my opinion, grab a snare sample off a Logic Bank and try to move it around. There's music in that, but musicality is a whole different thing. Being that kind of artist is something that I hold to a very high regard, at least my own opinion.
Yeah, you're so right about getting the stock snare sound and just kind of moving it where you need to, having that feel so inorganic. I mean, you can do it, and I have done it many times, and I feel like I'm in a rut personally now, just because that's how I've gotten used to doing things, and I don't really have a way to record live drums, so there's that. But there's also no excuses, and it's more fun to make it your own instead of just look for things that already maybe sound good. It's like, well, maybe having like the best audio quality isn't going to give you that spark or that feeling the way where if you start something simply from your heart, that it'll really flesh out in a way you want it to. And I do want to keep.
Yeah.
I would love to keep talking about this, but I do have to get to the rest of the.
I know.
Questions.
Sorry. We can talk all day.
Just because my computer is going to die eventually, and I need to.
Oh, okay. I
feel
you.
Everything, Yeah. But with that, question number 3 is: who's your dream artist or producer to work with?
Oh man, it was Richard Swift. It genuinely was Richard Swift. I kind of think it would be really funny to work. Well, I mean, producer-wise, it would be really cool to work with someone like. I keep thinking it would be really funny to work with someone like Jack Antonoff, or someone who's like really like poppy in a way that is about someone like Saint Vincent would be really cool. I mean, these are big names, obviously, but working with Rado. Yeah. Working with Rado a couple times on records was a really important. He's been probably the only person to produce my records that hasn't been self-produced, because he really gets what I'm doing and he really understands it, and we work well together. Richard Swift, though, was probably just someone that I hold to such a high. I really put him up there in terms of one of the greatest producers because of what he's been able to do. Someone like Eric Copeland, though, his music is really interesting. Also, I've been working with Sam France from Foxygen, and he is an unbelievable musician, producer, recorder. He's got an unbelievable pair of ears on him. So I mean, a lot of my friends are people that I love collaborating with, but bigger names, yeah, someone like Saint Vincent would be cool, or like Sylvia Massey, or some of these big producers that are like really like killing it in different genres. I'm trying to think. There's one name in specific that I'm like thinking about that I'm drawing a blank on, that I've been watching his videos. I can't remember, but there's a lot of so many great producers out there now. I think my brain keeps going to Jack Antonoff. I don't know why.
We're putting it out there. Let's manifest.
Yeah,
the Jack
yeah,
Antonoff production.
I don't really even like love what he does, but for some reason it just like I mean, I don't not like what he does, but it doesn't like make me feel like oh what the hell is his name? Chad Blake. Chad Blake is amazing. He worked with like Los Lobos, yeah, people like that. Like there's so many people, but yeah, Jack Antonoff's cool. I would hang out with him maybe. I don't know if I would. Oh, that guy Ariel Reichstock. Ariel, that guy's cool. He worked with like Vampire Weekend and like Haim and
cool.
And Rostam, another great producer.
Rostam is sick. He's really
Rostam
good.
would be cool. I'm not a huge, honestly. This is maybe should or shouldn't say this. I'm not a huge fan of like Claro. I don't know why. I just can't really find, not to like throw spikes out there, but I don't really like her songwriting very much. It just feels she feels like an industry plant. I don't know. Just me.
He's taking shots at Claro here.
Sorry. Edit that out. No,
I'm just kidding. But no, Rostam is an amazing producer. I do like how he produced Haim's new record. He just has a great ear for things.
He did good on Claro stuff too.
Yeah.
I don't love her songwriting really. It's just the thing. It just doesn't feel real to me. I don't know why. It feels like she's a plant. I don't know.
Okay, it's all subjective. So question number 4 is, what's on your musical rotation right now?
Like listening wise?
Yeah.
Elvis Costello, Get Happy, Armed Forces by Elvis Costello, Burt Bacharach. There's this band called Dynasty from the 80s. It's really cool. Using this guy, Leon Silvers, who was a producer in the 80s. He kind of helped with this really big like R&B movement that was really cool. Also this band called The System. A really cool band called The System. There's a song called You're in My System. I love that. I love that their name's The System and the song's called You Are in My System. And it's got this sick synth bass part that I've taught in a couple lessons because I just love the line. Let me see if I can name one more. There's a lot of shit. I don't know. Yeah, Eric Copeland, another one. Sam Francis has been trying to get me to listen to Eric Copeland, and I listened the other day, and so interesting, that music. Link Ray, John Martyr. Oh, Steve Winwood. I had not listened to much Steve Winwood. I know these are all like, if your listeners are young, they're not going to know like any of these names except the Claro, who I just shat on a little bit, so I feel bad. But a lot of these names are, I'm a big, like, I love songwriting, and sadly you don't really see as much effort into that kind of musicality of songwriting nowadays. It's a lot about the vibe, a lot about the the dance beat or the 4 on the floor, or even when it's not a dancey song, it doesn't even feel. It doesn't feel like if I was to take this song and play it on a different instrument, like a piano and a vocal, it would work. It only works in its own environment. Where a song like Lithium by Nirvana, you take that song and you move it around on 10 different instruments, it's going to sound amazing on every incarnation because of how pure the writing is. You couldn't do that with a lot of songs. I think bands like Haim, you probably could. They have some stellar songwriting. They're one that I think that they're, in terms of the pop world, they're doing some good shit. They're also in like the a little bit of the 90s rock vibe, and with some of the like Sheryl Crow kind of stuff to it, and Shania Twain vibe. Which I love. I think those two songwriters are genius. So I think that that's kind of a good stride to hit in the cool genre to like have come back.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Haim is great. I do think you're right about nowadays the vibe being typically more important for a lot of people. But I think with you focusing on the songwriting and not really worrying about how sleek things sound on every instrument, or, what cool synth can we get that literally doesn't exist yet. It's like you're focusing on the things that are what, bring people back over time because it gets stuck in their head. And, maybe it isn't the fad in the moment, but things always come back around, and people want to hear a song that stays in their head. I mean, like, what was that song by Hosier, Take Me to Church. That was such a, it's such a out there song to be a #1 pop hit for like a whole ass year. Same with like Gautier's Somebody I Used to Know.
Like Somebody I Used to Know.
It's like, those came out of nowhere and everyone fell in love with them, and they're great actual songs. Now maybe they're overplayed, but at the end of the day,
no, they're good songs. I mean, because I could sing them back to you right now, you know, and that's the big thing when I have artists come in here and I'm trying to find a way to get a hook for a chorus. I want it stuck in my head, you know. And I as a kid, I didn't really value the hook because I thought it was a cheap thing, like this idea and even the visual of a hook. You're thinking you're kind of deceiving your audience. You're trying to catch them. It's like, no, you want to bring them, you don't want to find them something that they want, you know, versus trying to catch them. But in reality, the hook is something that is truly essential to what makes a song great. Whether it's a tagline with the name of the song or just a really great melody in a verse or something, you know, that's something that is, as you said, I mean, the cream rises to the top. It'll always be, you know, it'll come back around if it's quality, you know, it'll stick around. Very well said.
Well, last question here before we're out of here is, what's the next piece of equipment on your wish list?
Well, I've been looking, I really want to get a stereo bus compressor to help my masters out. Warm Audio makes some really great stuff. I've been really repping the Warm Audio gear. They're really affordable and they're all really great pieces of gear modeled off of, you know, older stuff. So as far as outboard gear goes, Warm Audio is my go-to. Their mics and everything. I'm also looking to get, what was the other thing I was looking to get? A couple, you know, I've been messing with plugins for the first time, honestly, in my whole career, because I've been an out-of-the-box guy for a very long time. And last year during the pandemic, I was doing mixing people's stems. So I had to, you know, for money, I had to work in the box and get plugins. So I've been working with like the Sound Toys plugins, and there's some really cool, inspiring stuff in there. But I'm still usually running when I'm recording, obviously only recording, I'll run to my, you know, my effects chain, my rack, and my different Tascam things that I'm using. But yeah, stereo bus compressor is something that I want to glue my mixes together a little more. I think that's one of the things that's missing right now. I'm doing it in the box to help limit and glue everything together, but I'm really trying to save up for one of those puppies.
That's a very practical answer, you know. A lot of people might be like,
yeah, it's not a fun answer.
No, I like it.
Keyboards.
I like that stuff because I think it's so important, and I'm not always very good at getting things that are practical, and they're more just for goofing off, you know.
Yeah, people are like, I want to get a new Moog or something. Yeah,
like the Eventide,
or a new guitar.
The Eventide Space Reverb guitar pedal or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of that. I got a really good spring reverb. I got a lot of good delay stuff, and you know, a lot of the time-based and modulation effects I have covered. I just want to get like a nice bus compressor will really, like a stereo bus compressor that I can run my mixes or run my drum overheads through it, will really just kind of like really snap everything into place. That's kind of the last thing I need. I mean, I have a decent console. I mean, at some point I'll have to get some maintenance on my tape machine because it's kind of old now. It's old, but I haven't really done any calibration in the last 4 years. So that's another thing. But yeah, I mean, instrument-wise, my guitar just broke, sadly. It fell off my stand. I had this Gretsch White Falcon that Lemon Twigs gave me for helping engineer one of their records.
Is it the one that's on your album cover?
Yeah, it's on that one album cover. It's kind of my sexy girlfriend guitar. It's like I really like put it on this, you know, the bed, like, and like look at it, and I worship it. And it fell off the stand, and the headstock cracked the back of it. I genuinely almost cried. I was like head in the hands for like 20 minutes. I think it's gonna be like a $300 fix, not a big deal, especially because the guitar was a gift for helping them out. But that thing plays so well, and it sounds really great through an amp. So I'm gonna get that fixed. But I've been thinking about also, I want to get a Telecaster at some point. I love Tellies, and that's the one sound that I think I'm missing a little bit, is that Telly twang.
Yeah, me too. That's what I kind of really want next. I have a old 73 Mustang that I'm looking at right now.
Nice.
And I love it, but it's just not as versatile as I thought it was going to be. The way a Telecaster or a Strat is very, like, you can do anything really with it. It's just...
Is it heavy? Is your Mustang heavy?
No, it's not that heavy. I've got a Guild Starfire hollow body from 72 that's heavier.
Yeah, since the 70s, like the 70s Strats and Tellys can be like 80 pounds, not 80 pounds, but they could be heavy.
Right.
Like the Lemon Twigs have one, and they have an old Telly that's like, you wouldn't think it's like solid wood.
Yeah, my buddy has a Telly as well, and I was kind of surprised when I picked it up for the first time that it was so heavy, because it seems like such a light
crazy.
guitar.
Yeah, right. And they're thick, but that's what some of the sound is. The sound is like just the wood, vibrating in such a pure way. It's like it's such a robust tone. So, those are my wish lists. Though I'm pretty okay on most of my gear. I mean, it's worked so far, and I kind of stick to what I know, and I like my equipment for that reason. It responds differently to a lot of different artists, and that's something I love about tape. Tape really like has a life of its own, and it brings a lot to the table that some people will chase with plugins or chase with, but it does a lot of, in my opinion, what makes something sound like a record is tape. A lot of people's favorite records, when especially records pre-90s, it's tape, and there's a reason why it sounds good. It's because it's literally put onto a physical interface, a physical thing, and it's particles aligning. And it's magic. That to me is like the next layer of magic versus writing. It's the concept that when you're recording on tape, it's hitting a physical surface, and the oxidized particles are like aligning to your music. It's like little ants that are like jumping in a row. It's very like, it's like electricity. I don't understand it. It's like, but it's there, and I love what it does.
Awesome, man. Just the way you describe the process gets me hyped to like want to go do it. It's so cool because you're
that's what you got to do. You just got to keep doing it.
I mean, you're right. It is magic, and it's been so cool to deep dive into your over 7-year career of releasing music, and it's been awesome to just talk with you about your creative process and your experiences working with people like the Lemon Twigs and Foxygen. Kevin Basko from
Okay.
Kevin Basko from Rubber Band Gun. Thank you for joining me for an episode of On That Note, man. It's been a pleasure, seriously.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, man. I'll talk to you a little bit later.
Talk to you soon.
All right, man. Bye.
Peace.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and you can even leave a comment down below to let me know who you're listening to. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.